Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel Zanko. I'm the founder of Mobile Your Life, an investment banking company that raise capital for technology, including blockchain, fintech, SaaS, but also more recently renewable energy, cannabis, and very deep innovation in technology. I just wanted to talk today a little bit more about my work and the opinion I have recently on the economy, money, what is money in general. We will go through history to see all the innovations that's been happening recently as well with the crypto markets, but also not purely crypto, but also the economy of machines with IOTA and Ethereum and Bitcoin, and also the implications that this technology is bringing to society, the role of governments, and also, where are we heading? What's next? No, but before that, let's talk a little bit more about what's money and what's the history behind it. Well, that goes back from ancient Mesopotamia when the first monetary and financial system started to work, and we realized that money at that time it was purely, based on commodities, pure gold, silver, or more ancient precious metal. But gold and silver were always the key to determine the value on the economy, right? That based on the economy of the nation, you had, you could have a lot of gold, a lot of silver, right? But what happened in that time? For example, a king or an emperor in that nation, if they used to have, gold or silver, then they will obviously take all these mines to their power, right? So their power will increase. What happened next? They try to kind of like extract the gold, for example, and then they kind of like create some type of paper money or coin, which in that time, and still it is the head, the face of the emperor or the king to represent the currency of that nation. And the question would be, the first question would be, why, if you have the gold already, why you don't transact with the gold directly instead of printing a paper money, right? And that's a very tricky question, but the truth behind it is that once the state or the king creates that mechanisms from gold or silver to create a paper money, it creates a market, meaning that you got paper money or cash, you could say, you got the state, and then you got a market where you got buyers, sellers, and there's free trade, or used to be trade like that back then in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, Greece, Romans, right? And once you got the market, then you start developing the economy in that moment. It's interesting because if we wouldn't have that mechanism of trading goods back then, maybe humanity wouldn't exist at all, because we could possibly kill each other without any motivation of transaction back then in the ancient times. So you have how they start creating you got this myth of the Bart, in the sense that people at the beginning, they didn't even need money per se, because they were exchanging the goods. The tricky part was to find a unit of measurement or equivalence between, let's say, if I want to change gold for chickens or eggs or food or coffee, it was very tricky to find that equivalence. So let's say money, in a way, which you will see that is nothing, is very in your imagination. It exists, it was created just to put a unit of measure to all these transactions, to all these trades, because it was a time that when the economy was growing and rising, it was difficult to measure, to find equivalent, right? So, okay, it appeared the paper money back at the moment, initially by silver, was a key commodity to do it. And then you got money. The question that is like, what is money at the end? The fiat, the US dollar, the euro, because it could be many things. It could be both. It could be nothing at the end. And why I say that is because, for example, money, it represents already a debt or a commodity or both, right? Or nothing of those. Because, for example, You find examples in England when the bankers in England lend money to the king, and the king with that money just writes some certificates of that to the people on their kingdom, right? So the bankers were earning interest for the money that they lend to the king, but also from the money that they lend to the normal people, the interest rate, right? So at the end, you realize that the cash you are holding is purely debt, no? And when we talk about debt, it's very, very profound, because you realize that debt comes from, the beginning of times. Even in the more philosophical way, you could say, and some philosophers and the ancient books like the Bible and the Vedas in Indian, once the human life comes to earth, you are already in debt with the gods in a way, So you have to pay sacrifice in the religious text to kind of like pay the debt to the universe in a way, because you are here on earth. That was the ancient text says, or myths about that. So once you are here, the state or the government or the kingdoms in a way play like we could call it like they're kind of like the representatives of that ancient wisdom or source of the universe here. I'm not saying that I believe in that. I'm just saying that was kind of like in the ancient books what was written. But that goes through the centuries, and you see how, for example, people pay taxes. And the question would be why people would pay taxes. It's a very tricky one as well, because the governments wants to few things. Governments and states, once they own the lands or the commodities, they need to create a state. They need to create a market. In order to create the market, they need to have the money in circulation on the economy in order to transact. And how the government could, put the hands on their money by collecting taxes. So in a way, obviously, taxes reflect when a market is growing. It could be depending on the tax policy of the government. On the other hand, also the state wants to take out the money of the people, in a way, because at the end, the state doesn't necessarily create the money, the paper money, I mean, but it enforces it in contracts between people by collecting the taxes. So you see that through history, for ancient Rome, ancient Greek, until modern society, that you see that, for example, Adam Smith said that in the Wealth of Nations book that there is an invisible hand that controls the market, right? And that invisible hand we can call that is the hand of God in a way, or the divine providence, that says Adam Smith. So it's interesting when you read that because that also reflects some thoughts of the German philosopher Nietzsche, saying a little bit the same in the way that with the Newton theory, right? That Newton theory is like there is a divine force that is, controlling our system, our reality, right? And Adam Smith took that into the economy, saying in a way that a state and the markets are opposite, But in theory, it could be the opposite, because once you got a state, they're responsible for creating the market. So that's interesting when you see the US dollar, the euro, the governments behind it are creating these markets and enforcing, the people to transact, in the money. It's all centralized, right? So that's kind of like a brief history of how humanity has been dealing with economy, with money. And you realize that money at the end is just a unit of measurement of all exchanges that are happening in the world. It happened in ancient Mesopotamia, Rome, Greek, until the modern days. But when you realize that debt is a key component in all this transaction between market and society, that's when you realize why this economic system is functioning. It would be purely based on debt, right? So that's kind of like a brief history of the money. For example, money could be even more complex when you see the euro, for example, when created the euro. So there is a French economist that wrote a paper very interesting about the euro. I will tell you the name in a little bit, which basically says that money, when you create a new currency, it could also create a new culture or a new state. Because when you see the euro state zone, you could ask yourself, is it just purely a currency, just to exchange goods, buy and sell, or it goes beyond in the sense that it could be creating a new cultural movement, a new state power, right? Because that's when you see the power of creating a currency. It's like a symbol. It's not necessarily just a unit, no, to exchange or buy or sell goods or services, no? So when you see the power of a currency, you see how can dominate the culture or the philosophy in a nation or state, right? So euro is like a good example of that very recently. So so far we have seen, well, back then in medieval times and ancient times, you see that church and state were together. They were both controlling the creation of this money, backing it by commodities or not, and they control it in a centralized way, both the church, let's say, and governments, right, through kings or emperors. But the church and the state were together. Then the church separated from this movement, and the political power, not necessarily dependent on the church, to issue the new economic systems, policies, tax policies, the credit system, the debt financing system. So once you see that, when the state and the church separated, it went in two different lines, until very recently. Now, the conclusion could be so far, and I was thinking before about that, and we will talk about it once we touch on the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, is that it seems to me that so far, if there is a state or nation controlled by a centralized power, there was a currency, right, circulating in the economy, and of course a market. So stated by Adam Smith and all these guys, they say if there is no state or that structure, right, like that hierarchy, it couldn't be a market, right? So far it was like that. It wasn't perfect, and it was giving a lot of problems, right? So on the other hand, once we see crypto economy, I will dig a little bit more on the definition, but touching base right now, when we see Bitcoin that appeared in 2008 with the paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, and when we see this decentralized peer-to-peer electronic money, electronic cash money to transact, not depending on any central party, like a nation, a state, or a church, then you start realizing that first time in the history of humanity that you could see how you could have a currency or a digital commodity, as they call it right now to Bitcoin, the gold 2.0, it could function the market without having a nation or a state backing it. Meaning, for example, when we start seeing Bitcoin, and I will dig more on that, you realize that it was not supported by any central party or nation. So all these theories backed by Adam Smith and all these economists suddenly got really challenged by this new approach, by this new paper that was released by this anonymous group called Satoshi Nakamoto. We still have no idea by real who created this protocol, right? Because it's like a phenomenon. So you see Bitcoin right now as a digital money is completely, Bitcoin could be the first application of the blockchain, because once we realize what is Bitcoin, then we go a little bit further, deeper, and then we realize the phenomenon of the blockchain, this database, right? So Bitcoin could be the first application of this beautiful revolution in technology called the blockchain, right? And then we will go through Ethereum, which has other, I won't go into the technical. I just want to give you more the overview, but also with a little bit of history, right? So we go with Bitcoin, and then Ethereum, And then these new tokens or currencies that are controlling what could possibly be the Internet of Things or the economy of machines, right? So you have uh, purely on the crypto side these three phenomena, which is Bitcoin, which we call it right now like a the Gold 2.0, Ethereum, which adds a new layer of innovation with the smart contracts and the ability to create applications within the platform and pretty much decentralize everything. And then you got the economy of machines, and we could call like a first example IOTA, which is a foundation that creates this currency for the economy of machines or the Internet of Things, right? So you start seeing how are emerging new assets, digital assets, backed by protocols, by algorithms that are not necessarily are not depending at all on any state governments, right? Which is a little bit tricky because when you see Bitcoin, which I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin, even if it's still a little bit old in the tech side, but thanks to that paper, we are seeing all type of innovation right now. You see that right now it could be centralized in a way because how it functions. Everyone who has compute power could become a miner in the network of Bitcoin and create Bitcoin, having this compute power, solving these hard complex mathematical problems, right? And then every 10 minutes you get a reward on the network, which every 4 years the reward gets cut by half. I'm talking about Bitcoin, which we recently had our third halving, and now the reward per block is 6.25 Bitcoin. So what I'm telling you is that it could be even the Bitcoin, which is a currency or a digital commodity, cryptocurrency that is decentralized, peer-to-peer network, doesn't need authorization from a government, is cheaper, faster, based on cryptography. You can also see that in a way it's not quite decentralized these days. So that's good. That's important to take note on this because as far as I know, I'm also very excited about this movement. You see that it's not quite decentralized, but still is a high innovative phenomenon because it gives you an idea of how the world is going, where the world is going right now. For example, right now with the current situation, the global pandemic, and you see how the economies has been crashing. For example, I'm from Caracas, from Venezuela, and you see how the financial system completely went down. The currency in our country was so weak that even Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies were more stable despite the volatility of the markets, right? And people started using real cryptos like Dash or Monero to transact in the economy, or just simply by as a mechanism to get then US dollars and save in other currency. But that gives you a glimpse of where the world is heading, because you see Bitcoin. I'm not saying that Bitcoin will be the currency, the new cryptocurrency for the economy, but it has become a good asset, a good digital asset to hedge against this crisis, this financial crisis. For example, in March, all the markets went down because of the COVID, and oil and gold and even Bitcoin as well. But at the end, Bitcoin and the crypto markets were very, very resilient, giving you a glimpse that these digital assets could become a good way to hedge against crisis. Obviously, it's still very new, and you still need more developments in terms of the speed, the scale, right? But what I'm trying to tell you here, because the idea to talk here is like the new economy and the implications on society. And when I mean the new economy is because we're facing I could say we're facing a really interesting moment, because we have, for one side, still we have our financial system with the fiat currencies and commodities that I was kind of like explaining to you a brief part of the history, even with some religious involved. And then you got this, we have 11 years already with this crypto revolution. which already has several tranches. So you have the Bitcoin side, then it appear the Ethereum, which with the smart contract, it gives you an idea on how the world could operate down the line in a decentralized way. And then the economy of machines that is also emerging. So we have humans and machines, and obviously machines will have their own economic system, also decentralized with this new type of currencies like IOTA, right? So going back to Bitcoin, as I was saying, and examples of economies like Argentina or Venezuela or in Africa, you see how crypto could be a good example of replacing these fiat currencies, this financial system that is existing, right? Because as I mentioned you before, money at the end is very, we could call it like, yes, it's our financial system right now, but money per se is nothing, in the sense that some even nations are not backing at all this money. They are printing all the time. And that doesn't happen, for example, in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you see, there is 21 million Bitcoins, a limited supply. That scarcity obviously provides an increase of value on the coin. And the miners needs energy. That's the key component for the miners in Bitcoin, with the compute power to release more Bitcoin, no? And get benefit with the rewards. And so Bitcoin, obviously the value of Bitcoin will go higher. And there's around, roughly I would say, like 100 years, 120 years to be mined the last Bitcoin, to get to the 21. Right now we have around roughly up on until 19 million Bitcoins, right? So you got this very resilient system, but it's having its own struggles as well, I would say, on the energy side. We will need more energy or more solutions on renewable energy to proper sustain the Bitcoin network, right? Then obviously with the Ethereum side and other blockchains, I'm talking Ethereum about just one, but we have other more like Stellar, and EOS and Neo. There's many more blockchain networks, but talking about Ethereum, we watched the first one that got the smart contract, right, phenomenon. You see how economies once decentralized, because I firmly believe that economies will be transitioning from centralized to decentralized, and it will take time, but we're seeing some glimpses of that. As I was saying, back in the days, you had church and state together. They got separated, right? Now you got the state with the central banks, the Federal Reserve controlling currency. But I see with the crypto, it's like a new force that is pushing this old system. And obviously, you could say that these new currencies, decentralized ones, won't need a state or a government, which is quite tricky because we don't know what's going to happen. In a way, are we going to be able to transact and do the economy without depending on the government? Well, at the beginning, that was like it seems with the Bitcoin. Obviously, the states and the governments will still be here, because remember the theory of from Nietzsche and Adam Smith and all these thinkers is there is no state, it's difficult to create a market. And also because the states do the regulations and the tax policies to incentivize, in theory, some of the economies. So imagine, and that's a question for you guys that are seeing, do the government will have to emerge into a new type of government, as back in the history when church and state separated? I think so. They have to be. Not only, I'm not talking about only on regulation. Obviously, there have to be regulation on all these projects, these new vehicles of raising, like at the beginning was ICO, then STOs. That definitely is going to happen. And obviously, we have to be involved with the government. But the component of the decentralized networks operating these systems is still a little bit tricky, because you don't know what's going to happen if governments will allow in some way that operate in a decentralized manner with regulation from the state, or it would be a more complete libertarian type of movement that with no state. The question would be, if there is no state, let's call it like that, and you got a decentralized network, will be a market. I think so. I believe it will happen something like that, or we could see little examples of nations doing that. But the truth is that now, and even now, you see governments like China creating these new coins, stable coins, or digital coins like yuan. The same might happen in the US or other countries, right? But you will definitely see, and that's the trend I would say after this pandemic is pushing us, and I believe governments will also be in that trend, is that one, economies will be more in decentralized models, more horizontal, not so much centralized with hierarchies and positions, but many of those institutions will collapse and will create these decentralized phenomena, and we still might have like a referee, a central referee or state trying to govern these new assets, which in essence is kind of like the same. Not the same, but humans, we're still humans, we still have to do pretty much similar activities, buy, sell, exchange. That's kind of like, that's where humanity holds, right? So again, what are the implications on society? First, you have we have to look at history to say how humans interact since Asia Mesopotamia, right? We still do the same. And secondly, you have the state, which has to emerge into a new force, which I believe is where we're seeing this transition right now. And then you have this crypto movement that it could be decentralized or partly decentralized, because as I mentioned you a little bit before, Bitcoin right now is very centralized, having most of the miners in a place or controlled by few groups that can manipulate the market. It's not the essence when Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the paper back in 2008, right? So again, we see the forces, society, I mean us as human beings transacting, enterprise, which will try to switch maybe into decentralized organization, DAOs, and trying to transact in a decentralized finance, the DeFi market. And then you have obviously the initial coins like Bitcoin, which many people call it like the gold 2.0 digital commodity, right? But don't forget, we still have a system, a machine of the fiat currencies like US dollar, euro, that are realizing the force of these cryptos, but they're kind of like testing what to do next. Should we put these assets on the blockchain, decentralize it, transact it, or we should create our own network to put the financial system into the network and transact it? I don't know. That's a question to reflect on it, right? Because, for example, you see industries or commodities like gold or silver that many people are talking, let's tokenize it, let's add it on the blockchain. But you realize that gold, for example, has been working the last 3,000 years, 5,000 years, and I don't think blockchain could be a use case for gold, just as a specific one. But for other assets, it could be. And it could avoid corruption, lower the fees, and the control and the tracking. So blockchain indeed is going to be there, but it's still a way to go, especially in creating these new forces like the governments trying to be not only creating new laws or regulation that motivates this type of trading or exchange in the markets with cryptocurrencies, but also building decentralized models, really decentralized models that allow humans and societies and nations to transact in a very, very different way. It's a question to ask because, as I mentioned you before, it's the first time, and you don't depend in a government or in a nation to transact on Bitcoin, to buy on Bitcoin, to obviously there's more regulation right now, and you have exchanges regulated, and you buy and sell Bitcoin, and those earnings you pay taxes. So obviously you still see the involvement in a way of the governments of the nations, but not fully. So that's the question there. So I was talking about the history of fiat, Then I was talking about the history of Bitcoin a little bit. How is it right now? How is the crypto market, which is going back a little bit right now, as I'm speaking. And then you got Ethereum. So talking about Ethereum, it's interesting because I see behind it when Vitalik Buterin created Ethereum, it's a very impressive idea in the way with the smart contracts. And talking about the smart contracts, it's interesting because when you're coding, when you're programming, that smart contract is like a language that you're giving an order to create something. So talking more in a esoteric way, the universe works in a way like Ethereum, like you create with your word, right? So the language you create with this programming language, and you're creating out of the air, out of ether, right? Like Ethereum, these new applications, which are still small. They are developing. Soon will be Ethereum 2.0, and the algorithm will change, etc. But my main point in general view is that creating these new assets are giving the option to humanity to create a complete new economic system, complete new society in the way they transact with Ethereum, right? With Ethereum blockchain, you know? So, or other one, but that's kind of like the example. You're creating a completely model. But the question again is, where is the governments or the nations, I mean the officials, are going to react when this completely grows into a way that is, you know, you can stop it. Because Bitcoin already is very different from Ethereum, and Bitcoin shouldn't be doing the Ethereum work and vice versa. So they both could complement each other. They're both very different and both very innovative. So when you see Ethereum creating decentralized organizations or applications, and you still see the users going into it, again, you have a liquidity there faster than other markets that, you know, again, humanity will ask to themselves, do we need still this old system? Do we, or not all, this traditional, right? And maybe you could say, maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, who knows? It's still very new to say. In my own point of view, I would say it will change for completely. So we'll still need time to see that. What is true about, and just to give you an example, when you create, as I was mentioning you before, the euro in Europe, you just didn't create a currency. You create a completely symbol, culture, a movement, a state, unified to transact. So it give you identity, it give you power, it give you, you know, like a more united nations between Europe, right? So that could happen similar way with Ethereum. So now you see a more connected world, and that you could transact without any central party, peer-to-peer with Bitcoin or Ethereum, and then you realize that could create a new zone or a new reality on top of the traditional fiat that we have already with the US dollar, euro, etc. And the question would be, if this is functioning, then the governments will start going in on that, which is already happening. As I mentioned, you see China making huge leaps of innovation there with the yuan, or perhaps the US. You see this movement with Facebook Libra coin, which is potentially helping on the transition of all these people going into this new reality. I'm not saying that the Libra coin is based on cryptography, decentralized, peer-to-peer like Bitcoin, potentially could be, but in essential is, you know, creating a new bank. But it's helping in the transition because, for example, companies like Facebook, they have billions of users that could help, you know, to bring into this, you know, new economy, and potentially flowing into Ethereum or flowing into another coin like Litecoin, and eventually going to the DeFi revolution that is happening right now, and staking the assets, which is in a way a very simple, rough way to say that, you know, the passive income creating on those digital assets, including Bitcoin. So at the end, is like what happened with the euro and the eurozone, that creates a new state power, a new identity, a new community, a new force. The same is happening with Ethereum, right? And last but not least, don't forget that it's happening so much innovation right now, not only on the blockchain, DeFi, crypto space, more in the financial markets, but you see how the Internet of Things are increasing. You know how the sensors, how the machines communicate themselves is creating a complete new economy because they are kind of like a new entity within our own society. So when you see humans and machines, machines will also have their own currencies, their own way of transacting. So again, you see machines interacting themselves, you see small nations, people around the world transacting in a decentralized peer-to-peer way, and then you have our traditional system with the governments. The question would be, the governments will be behind all this innovation, will try to replicate the same protocols in order to innovate or change a little bit the the society, how society works, and also how society change. Because seeing those all innovations, you see that society itself will change completely. Many of the institutions won't work. Many of these centralized big financial institutions might not be the same because you have new revolution coming in. They might do the same like governments to replicate and go for the how you say for the innovation, like, you know, let's try to create more decentralized finance application, let's collaborate with this innovation, let's create lands in the world that allow innovation to happen without too many restriction or regulation. And then once they grow, they come to the bigger marketplace, the bigger markets. Yes, it could be. So that gives you a glimpse. Now, talking about our reality, our modern society right now, you see that with the COVID and the pandemic, you see it has been a full impact on the whole planet. First time in humanity, you see how the complete planet, in a way, stops being at home, right? And you see how the economy is crashing, how the economy is falling, but also how the economy is emerging in new models, like I was mentioning you before, which people could tap in that force and grow. But more essentially, is like the models of society are changing. And you don't need to work in an office. You don't need to work in a specific company. You could be from your home working and earning passive income or revenue without the need of a employer, direct employer, or, you know, obviously many people depend on that. But the forces are taking us into a transition with this pandemic to create new models, more horizontals, that people could earn revenue in a passive way or active way, but not necessarily depending on a hierarchy or corporation. Many will get affected, many are already affected, but I think the transition that is happening with this COVID is forcing us, pushing us to a new time on the economy, a new time with the technology, and a new time that are emerging all these forces. So you see as well, again, machines with humans, you see AI, you see how IoTs, you know, you see now the blockchain, but more especially how these crypto decentralized forces are trying to fight, not fight, to challenge this financial system. It's already happening, and especially for emerging markets where I come from Caracas, from Venezuela, you see how these new models could work to benefit society in a way. This is still very new, it's still very complex. Many people still don't have the full landscape of what's happening, but I'm definitely sure that the pandemic that happened, unfortunately, right now, is pushing us to this new direction, or is accelerating, because we were already on track on all this innovation, but it's accelerating the whole procedure. So if you want to keep an eye on all the work we're doing, please go to mobileyourlife.com. We have research papers on technology from IOTA, Ethereum, Bitcoin, DeFi. Also, we talk about the markets on a weekly basis, and we focus purely on raising capital and joining in high innovative startups to propel them in several fields. So please keep an eye on our work. If you need help, please let me know. And Gabriel Zanko, founder of Mobile Your Life, thank you for watching.